Behind the veil, a story untold. The dimly lit room held a heavy silence. A young woman, barely out of her teens, sat staring at her hands, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of pain. Her name is Sarah, and her story, like many others, remains hidden behind the veil of societal taboo. Forced into prostitution by circumstances beyond her control, Sarah represents the countless women in Pakistan trapped in a cycle of exploitation and despair. Sarah's journey into the dark underbelly of society began with her father's untimely death. Left to fend for her younger siblings and ailing mother, she was lured into the trade with promises of quick money. The reality, however, was far from the gilded cage she was promised. Sarah's story is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of women in a society where poverty and lack of opportunity often push them to the brink. We must ask ourselves how many more Sarahs are out there, lost in the shadows, their voices unheard, their stories untold. Poverty's grip, the economics of despair. Poverty, often described as the root of all evil, plays a significant role in perpetuating prostitution in Pakistan. For many women like Sarah, it becomes a last resort, a desperate attempt to survive in a society that offers them limited opportunities. The lack of education and employment prospects leaves them vulnerable to exploitation, forcing them into a life they never chose. The allure of quick money, especially when compared to the meager income from traditional jobs, can be blinding. The harsh reality, however, is that most of these women barely make enough to survive. They are trapped in a vicious cycle of debt and obligation to their pimps or madams, with little hope of escape. Beyond individual poverty, systemic economic factors also contribute to the issue. A lack of investment in education, especially for girls, limits their future prospects. Addressing prostitution requires tackling these systemic issues and creating an environment where women have genuine opportunities to thrive. We need to address the root causes of poverty and create a society that offers women genuine choices and opportunities for a better future. Social stigma, a life in shadows. The social stigma attached to prostitution in Pakistan further isolates and marginalizes these women. They are ostracized by society, labeled as immoral and unworthy, their voices silenced by shame and fear. This stigma prevents them from seeking help, forcing them further into the shadows. They live a double life, their true identities hidden behind a mask of secrecy. The fear of judgment and rejection from their families and communities is very real. Many women in prostitution live with the constant threat of exposure, which could lead to honor-based violence or further ostracization. This fear perpetuates a culture of silence, making it even more challenging to address the issue and provide support to those who need it most. We must challenge the social stigma attached to prostitution and create a more compassionate and understanding society. Only then can we hope to break down the barriers of judgment and offer them the support they desperately need. Legal loopholes, trapped in a vicious cycle. The legal landscape surrounding prostitution in Pakistan is complex and often contradictory, further complicating the issue. While prostitution itself is not explicitly legalized, there are legal loopholes that allow it to operate in various forms. This ambiguity creates a breeding ground for exploitation and abuse, leaving women vulnerable to trafficking and violence. The lack of clear legislation and enforcement mechanisms allows brothels and pimps to operate with impunity. Women are often trapped in exploitative situations with limited legal recourse. They are subject to violence, abuse, and coercion, with little protection from the law. This legal gray area perpetuates the cycle of exploitation and makes it challenging to hold perpetrators accountable. There is an urgent need for comprehensive legal reforms that address the complexities of prostitution in Pakistan. A more nuanced approach is needed, one that moves away from simply criminalizing the act to addressing the underlying factors that contribute to its existence. Section 5. Exploited and abused, the dark side of the trade. The world of prostitution is often shrouded in secrecy, masking a dark underbelly of exploitation and abuse. Women in this trade are highly vulnerable to violence, both physical and sexual. They are often subjected to inhumane treatment at the hands of pimps, madams, and even customers. Their stories are harrowing reminders of the human cost of this trade. Trafficking for sexual exploitation is a grave concern, with women and girls often lured from impoverished communities with false promises of a better life. They are then forced into prostitution, their lives controlled by their traffickers. The trauma they endure has long-lasting consequences, affecting their physical and mental well-being. The lack of legal protection and social support makes it even more challenging for these women to escape their abusers. Addressing the issue of exploitation and abuse within the sex trade requires a multi-pronged approach. Section 6. Public perception between morality and reality. Public perception of prostitution in Pakistan is often a complex mix of morality, judgment, and a reluctance to address the issue openly. The conservative nature of society often leads to a moralistic condemnation of the trade and those involved in it. This judgment, however, rarely extends to understanding the circumstances that lead women into prostitution. There is a general lack of awareness about the realities of the trade, with many viewing it through a narrow lens of morality. The voices of the women involved are often missing from the conversation, their stories unheard, and their perspectives ignored. This lack of understanding perpetuates stereotypes and hinders the development of effective solutions. Changing public perception requires a shift in the narrative. We need to move away from judgment and towards understanding. It is crucial to create a space where the issue can be discussed openly and honestly, without fear of judgment or reprisal. Section 7. Government response. A glimmer of hope. The government's response to the issue of prostitution in Pakistan has been largely inadequate, characterized by a lack of political will and limited resources. While there have been some efforts to address trafficking and provide rehabilitation services, these have been fragmented and insufficient to address the scale of the problem. The lack of a clear legal framework and the ambiguous nature of existing laws create loopholes that allow the trade to flourish. Law enforcement agencies often lack the resources and training to effectively address the issue, and corruption further hampers their efforts. This lack of accountability allows exploiters to operate with impunity. However, there have been some positive developments in recent years. The government has established a National Commission on the Status of Women, which has been vocal in advocating for the rights of women involved in prostitution. There have also been initiatives to provide vocational training and economic opportunities for women seeking to leave the trade. While these efforts offer a glimmer of hope, there is a need for a more coordinated and comprehensive approach. Section 8. Societal barriers breaking the silence. One of the biggest challenges in addressing prostitution in Pakistan is the wall of silence that surrounds it. The social stigma attached to the issue prevents open dialogue and discourages women from seeking help. This silence protects the perpetrators and perpetuates the cycle of abuse. Traditional values and religious beliefs often contribute to the stigma. Prostitution is seen as a moral failing, and those involved are ostracized and shamed. This judgmental attitude prevents us from seeing these women as victims of circumstance and makes it difficult for them to reintegrate into society. Breaking the silence requires a fundamental shift in societal attitudes. We need to create a culture of empathy and understanding where women feel safe to come forward and share their stories without fear of judgment. Section 9. Empowering change, a way forward. Addressing the complex issue of prostitution in Pakistan requires a multifaceted approach that tackles the root causes and provides support to those affected. Empowerment, both economic and social, is crucial to breaking the cycle of poverty and exploitation that often leads women into prostitution. Providing education and vocational training opportunities for women and girls, especially those from marginalized communities, can equip them with the skills and knowledge to pursue alternative livelihoods. Access to microfinance and entrepreneurship programs can further empower them to become financially independent. Social empowerment involves challenging societal norms and attitudes that perpetuate the stigma surrounding prostitution. This requires raising awareness about the realities of the trade, promoting gender equality, and advocating for the rights of women involved. Creating a supportive environment where women feel safe to seek help is crucial. Safe houses and rehabilitation centers can offer a haven for women seeking to escape prostitution and rebuild their lives. Section 10. A call to action, illuminating the path to justice. The issue of prostitution in Pakistan is a complex one, deeply intertwined with poverty, social injustice, and gender inequality. Addressing it requires a collective effort from the government, civil society, and individuals. We must move beyond rhetoric and take concrete action to create a just and equitable society where every woman has the opportunity to live a life of dignity and respect. We must demand that our government strengthens legislation, improves law enforcement, and allocates adequate resources to address the issue effectively. We must hold our elected officials accountable for their inaction and push for policies that protect the rights and well-being of all citizens, regardless of their circumstances. As individuals, we must challenge our own biases and prejudices and work towards creating a more compassionate and understanding society. We can support organizations working on the ground, volunteer our time, and use our voices to advocate for change. By shining a light on this hidden issue, we can begin to dismantle the systems of oppression and create a more just and equitable society for all.